guys, and welcome to Check Your LWTV. And today I'm going to do a review of Live Free or Die. As you would have known if you've seen the last 2 or 3 videos, I've been looking at rules covering the American War of Independence, and I've just finished a complete playthrough of Live Free or Die using 28mm miniatures and refighting this the first Saratoga or Battle of Freeman's Farm scenario available from Little Wars TV. Live Free or Die are a set of rules written by the guys at Little Wars TV, and they're a very brief set of rules insofar as if you purchase the rules, it's essentially a 20-page document, and only 4 pages are actually the rules. The rest of the document is dedicated to frequently asked questions, design philosophy, and 3 scenarios. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dive in to the rules themselves and give you a rules review using the same scoring system that the guys at Little Wars TV have. Now, the system they use essentially gives the rules, divides the rules into 5 categories, and these categories are presentation, playability, mechanics, historical flavor, and support. And it's a weighted system. Presentation is worth 10%, playability and mechanics are worth 30% each. Historical flavor gets a 20% weighting, and finally support gets a 10% weighting. So that's the system that the guys at Little War TV use when they do rules reviews, and I think it would only be fair for me to use the same system when reviewing their set of rules, Live Free or Die. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it and let's do a rules review using the rules review system from Little Wars TV for a set of rules from Little Wars TV, Live Free or Die. So the first thing we're going to look at is presentation. Okay, so the rules can either be purchased as a hard copy set of rules directly from the guys at Little Wars TV, or you can get them as a PDF. I've got the PDF version because I reside in Australia and I wanted to do it on the cheap, save as much money as I can because postage costs are pretty exorbitant. They cost $17.76 US if you get the hard copy, and a percentage of that that goes, I think 50% of the profits from these rules go to the American Battlefield Trust, if I'm not mistaken. But you can get the PDF version, I think, for around about $10. I'll look in the description below, and you'll find a link to where you can get the rules, and obviously you can see the price there. But essentially, it's a PDF set of rules, and I have them here on my little iPad tablet. And as you can see, perfectly functionable. And as a PDF goes, seamless. It's full of nice little illustrations. It's well written in just plain English. Like I said, the rules themselves are only 4 pages. You get 3 scenarios in it, and you know, I can't really fault it in regards to presentation. So what I've given it, if I remember correctly, I gave it 8 points out of a possible 10 because it's a PDF. I mean, there's always room for improvement. One criticism I would have is there's probably some space in the actual formatting where the rules could have been expanded a bit more rather than you know, having little pictures and stuff like that in it. But I understand how important that fluff can be. That said, 8 out of 10, that's got to be a pretty good score. Okay, so the next category is playability. Now, I gave that 8 out of 10. I might as well just get it out there right away. Now, playability is basically how quickly can you get, once you obtain the rules, get miniatures on the table and playing. And, with only 4 pages of rules, one, it's not hard to learn. It's not like you have to do, read the rules, 2 or 3 times. It's not like you have to play the game, and as you're playing, you're constantly referring back to the rules. Once you've played one turn, essentially, you can just go off the quick reference sheet. And the quick reference sheet is literally just a single page. So playability-wise, I mean, again, like I said, 8 out of 10. The figure count isn't really heavy for these rules. They were written predominantly for 15 mil figures and below. And so, I only have 28 mil miniatures for this particular period. And I think the American War of Independence really lends itself to 28 mil because the battles aren't that big. So I don't think, it's not difficult to get the miniatures together. It's not difficult to get the terrain together, and the rules themselves are not complicated in any way, shape, or form. So for playability, I've given it 8 out of 10. So the next thing we'll look at is mechanics. Now, as for mechanics, the rules are basically, there's nothing original here. Essentially, what the guys at Little Wars TV did is they took Loose Files and American Scramble, which were written by Andy Callan way back in 1987, and they've simply streamlined it and made the whole system a little bit more easy to play. There's no randomized movement as there was in Loose Files and American Scramble. And they've taken the troop categories. In Loose Files and American Scramble, there were 5. They've cut it down to 4. But the actual sequence of play and all the mechanics are pretty much straight from, well, I won't say they're straight from Loose Files and American Scramble. They're very similar, and they've added in some other things. There's nothing in here that you won't have seen before. So mechanics-wise, it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing original. In its favor, the rules are quite brief. Like I said, there's only 4 pages of rules, but therein lies one of the problems with the rules. And one of the problems is there's a lot of holes in the rules. There's a lot of things that you will come across in the game when playing a game that a rule doesn't cover. Now, to their credit, the authors of the rules specifically state, and I'll just read straight from the rules. It says, inevitably, a 4-page set of wargame rules will leave players with unanswered questions that are not explicitly covered. Some of the rules, I just find really, really odd. Now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. These are the ones that really stand out to me. The first one is units that are charged in flank. Now, in the rules, when you hit a unit in flank, it's really no different from hitting it front on. The only consequences for the flanked unit is if it loses the melee. To me, this seems to be putting the cart before the horse. I would have thought that there should be some modifiers in the melee phase that cover units being taken in flank. I would make a rule and it wouldn't have been a difficult fix. Something as simple as a line that says, or any units taken in flank either fight with just 1d6 or have their dice total halved. And I think that would have solved the problem there. Instead, they just fight just like any other unit does. Where they really get hurt is if they're defeated. And the fact of the matter is, if you've got 2 units that are similar quality, and and one of them is being hit in the flank, and there's really nothing else splitting the difference between these units, it's not unusual, and it's a 50-50 dice roll, generally speaking, that the unit that is being attacked in flank will drive off the unit that is attacking it in the flank. And to me, that seems pretty odd. The other concern I have is in relation to fatigue on units. The way the combat works is you can have units that basically crash into each other and they conduct a melee. And one of the negative modifiers in the combat is the unit that has the most disruption loses one dice, and I've got no problem with that. But here's the problem. You can have a situation where a unit is fighting with DMZs on it. These are the disruption points, or let's use the term shock or whatever. They have these disruption or these DMZs on them. It wins the melee. It suffers enough DMZs that results in a base being removed. And in that process of removing that base, all the DMZs come off the unit as well. Now, yes, the unit might have to do a morale check for losing a base because of the DMZs that were accumulated prior to the conclusion of the melee. But you can have a situation where a unit suffers the loss of a base, and all the DMZs are also removed as well. So if a unit has 4 DMZs, they take another casualty, they lose a base. Okay, they've suffered a casualty, but they've also lost, they don't have any DMZs on them whatsoever. This in of itself is not, I don't think, much of a problem. But then you can have this situation where units continue to lose bases, and if they're reasonable quality troops, first or second class, they're probably going to pass the morale check that's required to be done because of a unit losing a base, and they will likely pass that morale check. And so you can have units that are reduced from 7 bases down to 1, and they just keep on fighting. Yes, they don't fight with as many dice as before, but if they're really high quality troops, it's not necessarily a massive detriment to their ability to actually inflict damage on opponents that they're fighting in close combat. And so you have these situations where units can just continually charge, hit units, break them, charge on, hit another unit, and just have this rolling momentum of going forward and shedding DMZs as a result of sustaining casualties and the like. But they just stay there. And a unit who goes from 5 bases down to 1, it still will advance and continue to advance. That to me seems odd. So mechanics-wise, I've marked it fairly harshly. I've only given it 5 for mechanics. That said, all these issues are easily fixed with simply just home rules. For example, the one that I've come up with is, as soon as a unit hits 50% casualties, it will not advance any further. It will hold its ground, it will shoot in defense, it will melee in defense, but it will not advance. So that's another, that's one way of getting around it. So there are massive, I won't say massive, there are large holes in these rules, but that's to be expected when you've only got 4 pages of rules. And for me, I think it's a little bit of a shame. I think for the one more page, for just that one more page, they could have put in some other little additional rules, things covering like brigade integrity, where brigades become exhausted and won't fight on anymore, or where units, at least individual units, become exhausted and will not advance any further. So for that, I've given it a 5. The next thing we look at is historical flavour. I think as far as historical flavour goes, Live Free or Die does a very good job. When I've played a game of Live Free or Die, it does feel like it's an American Revolutionary battle. The terrain does cause DMZs on unit, and unless you have an officer right there, and by officer I mean a general figure or one of his lieutenants, unless you have an officer right there, moving through difficult terrain will cause all sorts of issues for units. And that's one of the things that when I think of the American Revolution, terrain does play a disproportionate effect on linear warfare in that period than it did in, say, on a Napoleonic battlefield. So it certainly feels that way, because you do have generals, and everybody was a general, having to really be Johnny on the spot, and exerting influence on units to get things done. Yeah, for historical flavour, I gave it, I really couldn't decide between 7 and 8, so I've given it a 7.5. Okay, so the final category we look at now is support. Well, I'm pretty sure there is a Facebook support group, but I'm currently cooling my heels in Facebook jail and have been for the last 3 weeks. So I haven't really been able to go there and have a look. But if there's a Facebook page, well, that's kind of handy. And if there isn't, there soon will be. So there is support there for Live Free or Die in that regards. But at actual forum, there's nothing there that I could find. There are plenty, however, of resources at Little Wars TV. They offer a scenario book, and I think there's 3 or 4 free scenarios that you can download. And it must be said that these rules, they don't have a points value. They are very much rules for scenario-driven play, and I personally like that. I've never really been a fan of points-based war games, because warfare is not battlefields aren't fair. Very rarely you get 2 evenly matched armies. So I find scenario-based games are my cup of tea. And so for that reason, I've given it a 7 points for support, which I think is probably a little bit generous, given the fact that there's no dedicated forum there. Hey, for rules that are only 4 pages long, and that basically encourage you, the player, to, if you've got any issues, sort it out between yourself and your opponent. These are a set of rules that reward collegial play, and I like that too. So it's one of those set of rules where you've got to work with the person that you're playing, and that's the way wargaming should be, quite frankly. Very Kriegspiel. And I played the game I've played solo, and it worked great. So I think that I tallied that all up, and I think I came up with 69, which is great. Yeah. So that's my review of Live Free or Die. I heartily recommend that if the American Revolutionary period for wargaming is your cup of tea, or even if it's not, even if it's something that you just want to dabble in, for what it costs to purchase the PDF, maybe it's a couple of cups of coffee in Australia, I think. It's well worth the investment, I think. It's a good set of rules, and I think they've done a good job. I just think, for the sake of just one more page, if they'd gone to 5 pages of rules, it wouldn't even been 5 pages. I think just a set of rules, just a couple of rules to cover fatigue on units and brigade integrity and the like, and how to do with flank attacks. I think I would have probably gone from a 69 to, really, who wants to go past 69? That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good score, I think. But it might have been a little bit higher. But anyway, that's my look at Live Free or Die. It gets a well recommended from me. Okay, that's it. That's pretty much it for my dabble into American War of Independence for a little while. I have got a set of rules modifications for General d'Armée that I'm keen to use for the American War of Independence, and so there's that as well. At this, and I've had a brief read through, and it looks pretty good. So it looks to me that my three go-to rules for the American War of Independence will be sharp practice for skirmishes, live free or die, and General d'Armée modified. And that's it for now. So without further ado, I'll leave you to it, and I'll catch you again soon, I hope. Ubiquay.